Hey everyone, welcome back. David in History for the Ages. So, pretty important topic here, and I'm wondering if anyone's ever heard of this idea before. I've already had a video out, Why the Jews. You can see the thumbnail for it here, and explain, the long history of why there's been so much anti-Semitism historically. What I've never really talked about how many civilizations, when you see a rise of anti-Semitism in that civilization, how it's a symptom of something greater that's wrong. And so it's kind of, I call this history's warning, in the sense of anti-Semitism destroys nations. And even if you're like, well, I don't care about Jewish people that much, if you care about whatever nation you live in, you should worry about it. And I think what I'm about to talk about doesn't just apply to Jewish people. I think in any society, when you see, this onslaught against a specific group because of their faith or any other kind of heritage or nationality, that's not a good sign. And I've got a lot of historical examples I could give you of this. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these. And again, I'd love your thoughts and your comments as we talk about this. What do you think? And so, we know the history, right? Just real quick, I can, give you thousands of years of examples of this, and this would be a very long video if I did that. But you can go back from the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Romans, the Middle Ages, all the way through modern times when you see examples of this, right? And I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them in this video, but I am going to hit some of the ones that I think are really crucial. And probably the prime example is Nazi Germany, right? If you think of Nazi Germany, Hitler's rise, 1932, 1933, and then of course you get the Nuremberg laws. I have a video on that. Kristallnacht, and of course the horrors of the Holocaust. What did we also see happening to Germany? I mean, Germany obviously fell as they see this rise of anti-Semitism. They fell into the darkest, most kind of soul-destroying moment in their history, right? Because of course the other things, it never just ends with the Jewish people. One of the things I also teach people is not only is anti-Semitism a symptom of an ill society, it never ends with the Jewish people, right? I mean, Hitler targeted gays and Poles and gypsies and many other groups as well. And sometimes it is said that the Jews are kind of the canary in the coal mine. But look what happened to Germany as a result. I mean, Germany was literally, Berlin was in dust. They had to split Germany in half as a result of World War II. And that was, again, it's a symptom. This anti Semitism is a symptom of this diseased society that Germany had become as a result of rising anti Semitism. Other examples go back a little bit in time. Spain, right? The Alhambra Decree, you can see an image of here. Ferdinand and Isabel, when they expelled the Jewish population out of Spain, 1492. This was again driven by a rise of anti Semitism, religious intoleration. And what did it do? It hurt Spain. The expulsion weakened Spain's economy, intellectuals that ended up leaving, skilled laborers ended up leaving, and that's impacted Spain in a negative way. So it's another example. This one is one that I know very well because this is exactly what happened to my ancestors, my grandparents and parents even, in Iraq, right? There was a good, amazingly thriving Jewish community in Iraq that provided a lot of things, and then Iraq again, anti-Semitism rose up. You had the Farud massacre in 1941. That's the image you're seeing here. You see the Nazi propaganda had a lot of influence inside of Iraq. And you see this mass exodus of Jewish people leaving Iraq. And this is exactly what happened to my parents and grandparents, where literally everything they had was taken away from them. I have a whole other video on what happened to the Jews in the entire Arab world, right? Not just Iraq. This happened everywhere. I use Iraq as example because of my ancestors, but yeah, I mean, you can see this in many places, and look what happened in Iraq. They fall into this horrible leadership. Iraq, post-World War II, becomes just a den of coup after coup, Saddam, and all of that nonsense. And again, anti-Semitism. So you see another example of it there. The Soviet Union, right? If you know a little bit about even before the Soviet Union, Russian history before the Soviet Union, you saw anti-Semitism and you saw the chaos inside of Russia. Then you get to the Soviet Union, you get Stalin's campaigns and suppression of Jewish cultures, all sorts of anti-Semitic policies targeting Jewish people, and basically scapegoating Jewish intellectuals. And they drove out a lot of talent. They again drove out a lot of Jewish people. And again, what we see happening to the Soviet Union, well, it collapsed, right? It fell into chaos as well. Now, I'm not saying, to be clear, it's because of anti-Semitism these civilizations run into problems. What, again, my point is that when you see anti-Semitism, it's a symptom of a declining civilization, right? It's a symptom that there's something wrong morally, politically, and people look at the Jewish people as a convenient scapegoat. And so when you start scapegoating people, there's something bigger wrong that you don't want to deal with. And that's what we saw then in the Soviet Union. You can go, folks, back to ancient Rome, right? I mean, if you want to go really far back, right? The destruction, here's a picture of the Arch of Titus and the destruction of the Second Temple. And then, of course, you had, Simon Bar Kokhba, and then you had Hadrian, who massacred the Jewish people. I have a lot of videos on all this as well if you want more deep dive into all of this. And some people say, well, wait a second, David, a counter argument would say this all happened during the quote unquote golden age of Rome. Rome was thriving. This doesn't show that the society was diseased. Well, what we see is this was not yet. Yes, it's happening during their quote unquote golden age, but what we're also seeing is they were doing this, and it was because the Roman Empire had grown too large, overextended, became strained. So they go and persecute the Jews, they steal the relics. And what history keeps showing us is civilizations, when they lash out at a minority, it doesn't have to be Jewish people, but we just see this often with the Jewish people. They've already become weak. They've already kind of started to fall, even though you don't see it, right? At that moment, you don't see things until the falls begin. So I think it goes ancient Rome as an example as well. And then I think it turns us all kind of coming back to full circle current events in our world today. Because, if you look at Europe, and I'm going to use France as an example, but I think you could use a lot of countries in Europe today, they're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism. I have some statistics here you could see from France. And again, this is a warning sign. As you see more anti-Semitism in France, I guarantee you that this, if they don't control this, is going to lead to more political fissures. You're going to lead to more conflict. You're going to see more conflict in the streets. You're going to see riots. You're going to see uprisings, because it's, again, a core symbol of something is wrong. And I'll give you another example, folks. Colleges. Colleges in the United States have become the epicenter of anti-Semitism. Generally, in the United States, there's not a lot of anti-Semitism. If you see a rise of that in the US, again, worry. But we do see a lot of it on colleges. And you see at colleges, again, I see this firsthand, having a lot of problems because, again, they've allowed this to flourish. And of course, there's an election, as I'm recording this, coming up in New York. And one of the guys running has refused to condemn the global terrorism that has happened. And again, you see this anti-Semitism again emerging. And I promise you, if this guy wins in New York, Gotham City. I mean, it's going to be Gotham City there. I can already tell you, because if he wins, it shows that there's such a disease inside of New York that people are accepting such a hateful a position that there's something else wrong, right? And all of this, I think, is lessons we can learn from in terms of, say, hey, again, you can say, even people are like, I don't really care that much of Jewish people. As I started with this, even if you don't care a lot about Jewish people, everybody should care about all people. But if you don't, then, even if you care about your own nation, you should not want to see this, because it's, again, a symptom of something bigger. So I don't know. I thought I'd put this out there as something to think about. Again, you could probably find a lot more examples of this throughout history. Leave your thoughts, leave your comments. And, I'm really getting curious if anyone's ever heard any of these before. You can watch my other videos on the rise of anti-Semitism historically. That's a good one to watch. And, of course, share these with others. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thank you for watching.